He was only 10 years old when everything in his life collapsed. Not slowly, not gradually over weeks or months of pain, but in one single, devastating night. A night that ripped his entire world apart in the space of a few dark hours and left nothing the same again. His name was Ethan Carter, a quiet, curious boy who loved drawing superheroes and eating his mother's pancakes on Sunday mornings. He lived with his mother, Maria Carter, in a modest third-floor apartment in Brooklyn, New York. It wasn't a fancy place. The walls were thin. The radiator made loud clanking noises in winter. Neighbors shouted through the hallways. But to Ethan, it was home. It was safety. It was the sound of his mother's voice humming old songs while she cooked, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, and the warm feeling of her hand on his head when she said goodnight. That night, everything ended. Ethan woke up suddenly sometime after midnight. He heard a heavy thud in the living room. Then silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. Too complete. Too heavy. He rubbed his eyes, slipped out of his small bed, and tiptoed down the short hallway in his pajamas. The only light came from the blue street lamp outside the window, casting long, twisted shadows across the walls. And there she was, his mother, lying on the floor near the kitchen table. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. Her favorite mug, the one with the bright yellow sun that she said reminded her of his smile, lay shattered beside her. Papers from the drawer were scattered. The television was still on, volume turned low. But there was no blood everywhere like in movies. No broken glass from a forced window. No signs of a wild struggle. Just her. Gone. Ethan stood there for what felt like forever, his small body frozen. He couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He just stared, trying to understand how the world could change so completely in one moment. Police arrived quickly. Red and blue lights flashed against the brick building outside. Sirens cut through the quiet Brooklyn night. Neighbors gathered in the hallway in robes and slippers, whispering, pointing, staring at the small boy who was now sitting on the stairs with a blanket around his shoulders. Officers moved in and out of the apartment. They took photographs. They asked short questions. They looked at the open window that was often left cracked for fresh air. They saw the missing $20 from her purse. And by morning, the label was already decided. A robbery gone wrong. Just like that. For simple words. Within days, the case file was closed. A thin folder with a few fingerprints that led nowhere, a couple of witness statements that said nothing important, and a final red stamp. Closed. Pushed into a drawer in some precinct basement where thousands of other files slept, forgotten. But Ethan Carter, this 10-year-old boy with messy brown hair and big, thoughtful eyes, did not believe it. Something deep inside his chest refused to accept that easy story. He remembered things the grown-ups never asked about. He remembered the soft click of the front door lock at exactly 10:38 p.m., not the loud crash of someone breaking in. He remembered careful footsteps moving through the apartment like someone who knew exactly where everything was. He remembered a shadow sliding across the wall near the fire escape around 10:45 p.m., tall, moving smoothly, disappearing too fast. He remembered his mother's single, sharp cry and then the terrible, heavy silence that followed. A silence that came too quickly, too neatly. He tried telling the police. Again and again. In the cold precinct room, sitting on a chair too big for him, with his aunt's hand resting on his shoulder, Ethan spoke clearly. I heard two people. Not one thief. Two sets of footsteps. The man who left, he wasn't running like a scared robber. He walked slowly, like he belonged there, like he wasn't afraid. The detective gave him that tired adult smile. The smile that says, you don't understand how the world works, kid. Go home, son. Let the adults handle it. Those words, that simple sentence, burned into Ethan's heart like fire. Because the adults did not handle it. They closed it. They ended it. Too fast. Too easy. Too convenient. That night, lying in his aunt's spare room that smelled of old blankets and dust, something changed inside the boy forever. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't only fear. It became determination. A heavy, quiet promise he made to himself in the darkness. If no one will listen to me, I will force them to listen. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And months slowly became years. While other children in Brooklyn played basketball on cracked sidewalks, laughed with friends, worried about school tests and new video games, Ethan sat alone. Every single day after school, he sat at the small wooden desk in the corner of his aunt's living room, an old laptop screen glowing on his face. He started from zero. He knew nothing about law. But pain has a way of turning into curiosity, and curiosity into obsession. He watched real court cases on YouTube for hours. He listened to lawyers argue. He rewound videos when he didn't understand the big words. Habeas corpus. Chain of custody. Circumstantial evidence. Motion to reopen. He wrote every single new word in a thick notebook. Then he searched their meanings late into the night until his eyes hurt. He taught himself how to build timelines. He drew the entire apartment on graph paper. Every door, every window, every possible camera angle the building had. He marked the exact minutes he remembered hearing sounds. 10:38, 10:45, 10:51. He collected every newspaper article about similar cases in New York. He read about families who fought cold cases for decades. He studied children who had spoken up in court before. He learned what pro se meant, representing yourself without a lawyer. Some nights the grief came back like a wave. He would cry quietly into his pillow, missing the way his mother smelled of vanilla and coffee, missing her laugh, missing her voice saying, "I love you, little man." But every morning, he woke up and returned to the desk. The pain had become fuel. The silence had become his teacher. By the time he turned 11, his notebook was filled with hundreds of pages. By 12, he understood more about criminal procedure than most adults who had never studied it. He wasn't a normal child anymore. He had become something else. A boy on a mission. 2 years and 4 months after that terrible night, Ethan Carter did something no one thought possible. He walked into the New York Supreme Court building alone. He was still small for his age. He wore the only dress shirt that still fit him properly and black pants his aunt had ironed twice that morning. In his hands was a worn blue folder containing everything he had spent years collecting. No lawyer stood beside him. No guardian. No adult helping him. Just Ethan. And the truth he refused to let die. The clerk at the counter stared in disbelief. "You can't file this by yourself, sweetheart." Ethan looked up calmly. "The rules say any citizen can file a petition for reconsideration if new evidence exists. I have new evidence. I checked the court rules online. Multiple times." After several phone calls and surprised looks, the petition was accepted. 3 weeks later, the hearing was scheduled. Word had spread quietly through the courthouse. A 12-year-old boy was representing himself in a murder case. People didn't know whether to laugh or feel amazed. Courtroom 214 felt enormous. High ceilings, dark wooden benches that creaked, the American flag hanging perfectly still, bright lights overhead, rows of serious faces, lawyers in sharp suits, a few reporters who had caught wind of the story sitting in the back. Ethan sat alone at the petitioner's table. His feet barely reached the floor. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his throat, but his face stayed calm. He had practiced this moment thousands of times in his mind. The judge entered, Honorable Regina Morales, an older woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. Everyone stood. When she saw the small boy sitting alone, her eyebrows lifted slightly. She settled into her chair. "Ethan Carter," she said, her voice firm but not unkind, "where is your legal representation today?" Ethan stood up slowly. He took a deep breath the way he had practiced. His voice came out clear and steady, the voice of someone who had waited years to speak. "Your Honor, I am representing myself." A wave of surprised murmurs swept through the entire courtroom. Lawyers exchanged shocked glances. The assistant district attorney smiled in disbelief. Reporters leaned forward. Judge Morales studied him carefully for a long moment. "You understand how unusual this is, young man?" "Yes, Your Honor. But this is my mother. No one fought for her, so I have to." The judge nodded slowly. Something in the boy's eyes, the quiet fire, the seriousness, made her allow it. "Very well. You may proceed, Mr. Carter." Ethan walked forward to the front of the courtroom. He connected his old laptop to the projector with hands that trembled only slightly. The first image appeared on the large screen behind him, a blurry but unmistakable CCTV still from the building's rear entrance. At 10:42 p.m. on the night of March 17th, Ethan began, his voice growing stronger with every word. This man entered our building using a keycard. This footage was never given to my family. It was never included in the original police report. The prosecutor stood up quickly. Objection. Your Honor, how did this child obtain this evidence? Ethan answered without hesitation. I sent a written request to the building's security company under New York public records law. They still had the original files. The police only asked for front door camera footage. They never checked the rear entrance. He clicked to the next slide. Detailed timelines. Exact minutes. Exact movements. At 10:47 p.m., the same man appears at the rear fire escape. At 10:53 p.m., he leaves the building. But the police report claims the robbery happened between 11 o'clock and 11:30. My mother's watch stopped at 10:51 p.m. The medical examiner confirmed the time of death. Their timeline is completely wrong. He laid out more documents. Building access logs. A name appeared on the screen. Robert Klein, the building's superintendent. He had full access to every keycard system and had personally maintained the security cameras 2 days before the murder. My mother argued with Mr. Klein 3 days earlier. She had discovered money missing from the building's tenant fund. She was going to report him. The police never interviewed him properly. They never checked his bank records. They never looked at the deleted camera files that I found. The courtroom had fallen into complete, heavy silence. Ethan continued, his young voice steady and clear. My mother did not die in a random robbery. She died because she knew something dangerous. And the system closed her case in just 4 days because it was easier than doing the real work. He placed the final document on the table. I am only 12 years old. I have spent every single day since she was taken from me learning how to do what the adults refused to do. I am not here asking for sympathy. I am asking for justice. I am asking this court to reopen my mother's case. For almost a full minute, no one spoke. The air felt thick. Judge Morales leaned forward. She looked at the boy, at the evidence on the screen, at the prosecutor, and then back at Ethan. Mr. Carter, she said slowly, her voice carrying weight, what you have done here today is remarkable. Based on the clear new evidence, the serious omissions in the original investigation, and the inconsistencies you have proven, this court orders the full reopening of the Maria Carter murder case. The district attorney's office will assign a new investigative team within 30 days. All evidence, including the building's superintendent, will be re-examined thoroughly. She lifted her gavel. Bang! Ethan stood perfectly still. No cheering. No loud emotion in front of everyone. Just a quiet, deep breath of relief. After more than 2 years of carrying the weight alone, someone had finally listened. As he walked out of the courtroom that day, the cold Brooklyn air hitting his face on the steps outside, he looked up at the tall buildings around him. His aunt hugged him tightly, crying. Reporters tried to ask questions. But Ethan only thought one thing. The fight wasn't over yet. New investigations could still fail. People could still lie. But he had proven something powerful that day. Justice is not always given freely. Sometimes it must be fought for with everything you have. And sometimes it takes the smallest voice in the room, the voice of a 10-year-old boy who refused to stay silent, to force the entire world to finally listen. 6 months later, Robert Klein was arrested and charged with the murder of Maria Carter. The evidence Ethan had forced everyone to look at, deleted files, hidden financial transfers, the master keycard records, finally brought the truth into the light. Ethan Carter never became an ordinary child again. The experience changed him, but it also made him stronger. He became living proof that courage does not wait for adulthood. Sometimes courage begins at 10 years old, in a cold Brooklyn apartment, with nothing but a broken heart and an unbreakable will to find the truth. And the city that had failed his mother so quickly finally listened because one small boy refused to let her story disappear.